Hello and welcome back to the show. My name is Sam and this is The Lonely Chapter. On this show, I speak to interesting people extracting their stories, the lessons they've learned along the way, and their knowledge in order for you to find value from it. Today, we're talking to return guests. So Tom Hughes was on episode 9 and we got him back in today, and it's going to be slightly different. We're just going to run through a few different things that we've been thinking about, things that we've sort of seen that we find interesting since our last episode. So that was probably 5 or 6 months ago. And time has flown. It feels like yesterday, but here we are. So if you enjoy this episode, please do share it with a friend. Follow the show if you're not already. And if you can rate the show as well, that really helps. Thank you for listening. This one was made for your enjoyment. Tom Hughes, welcome back. How does it feel to be back in the hot seat?
Thank you for having me. Yeah, feels good. I enjoyed the last episode, so we'll see where this one goes.
Your episode is currently, as of the 6th of December 2024, the most listened to episode of The Lonely Chapter. How does it feel to hold that title?
Surprising.
Surprising.
But yeah, I mean, it feels good. I guess, I don't know whether, because it was kind of varied, it could be applied or multiple sort of people found it useful or sort of relatable in a way, which may have helped, I guess. But yeah, feels good. I'm glad that it's doing good.
Yeah, I think a lot of people resonated with like dyslexia, growing up with dyslexia, people who have families or children who suffer with dyslexia as well, and just understanding that journey. But also the stuff we spoke about agility, people involved in sports and sports science, that's interesting to those people. And then obviously the firefighting story at the end as well. So it sort of branched loads of topics, but yeah, I think it's a good episode. And obviously the numbers prove that.
That's it.
So kicking off today, we're just going to throw a few ideas back and forth basically and just discuss them. So I'm going to start off with Christmas creep. Have you heard of Christmas creep?
No.
Okay.
That's a good start.
So Christmas creep is something I read about not long ago. And some people don't believe it's a thing. Some people think it's a thing, whatever. So the idea of Christmas creep is that this idea that over the years, and I think it spans back to like 1880, like it's quite a while back, Christmas has sort of got earlier and earlier in terms of like retail, advertising, songs on the radio, that sort of thing. And yeah, it seems to like creep forward a bit earlier each year. Would you agree with that, or you think it's a myth?
I would say that I think as far back as like adulthood, I would say it does seem to start earlier, but I don't know whether that's a necessity through adulthood where planning becomes an issue, whereas when you're a child, you're at the sort of mercy of your family and your parents deciding when Christmas officially begins, which is usually December. I think as an adult, there's so many other things that come into it in terms of you trying to get family members together. They've all got their own lives, their own things that they're trying to organise. You're trying to find a way to feed everyone. You're trying to find a way to pay for presents and get presents sent to places and stuff. And so I think there's an element of it needing to be the process of Christmas needing to be started earlier because of those factors. And then I think maybe sort of companies and marketing agencies potentially take advantage of that. Maybe
there's a thought I've never really had in terms of when you're younger, you don't have involvement with it apart from like you're just at school and then you're off school and it's Christmas for 2 weeks and it's like cool. But yeah, I suppose the planning of it and like going into shops, hearing the music, buying the things, you got a lot more to buy. But I looked into it a little bit because I was interested in it, and apparently there's a few things that sort of changed it. I think there was originally in America, at least, they waited until after Thanksgiving to sort of start doing all the Christmas stuff. But there was a president, I think it was Roosevelt. I'm not 100% sure though, so don't fact check me on that. They pushed Thanksgiving like a week forward to then like allow more space for Christmas, which is quite interesting.
Oh.
And the other thing was the war, the Second World War, because of obviously like posting stuff was all delayed and whatever was happening in the world was happening. Everyone was encouraged to sort of ship presents and letters much earlier than they normally would, which then obviously pushed the buying for Christmas further forward as well.
Okay.
So yeah, that's it.
Interesting.
And the other thing, like I mean, I remember I used to work in retail. I used to work in the card section at a department store. And Christmas cards used to come in like peak summer. It was the weirdest thing.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
yeah,
I
that's
used
a
to
bit
sit.
much.
I used to sit in the what would it be? The storeroom, signing in like Christmas cards and like counting them all,
Yeah.
checking they're there. And I was like, this is so
No,
weird.
that's silly. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I love Christmas. I'm all for it
Yeah.
being started a little bit sooner, but yeah, that's daft. There's
Yeah.
no need for that. There's
Yeah.
no justifying
Well, they don't go on
that.
the shelves then, but they're in. They're in. But maybe one day they'll be on the shelves then. Maybe it will creep that far forward.
Who knows?
So that is Christmas creep. Go on. What are you going to hit me with? What's next?
One thing I was gonna sort of I found interesting recently is it's a bit of a 180 turn from Christmas, but one thing that I watched recently which caught my attention was sort of speaking around men's mental health,
Mhm.
and I know you're very keen on that subject and the importance of it, and it was going along the lines of how men can be treated for poor mental health differently to women, and how one shoe doesn't fit all, essentially.
Mm.
And it was interesting. It was interesting. I think it was on the Chris Williamson podcast. I can't remember the guest he had on, the name of the guest, but he basically said that men don't necessarily need to talk to other people about the hardships that they're going through. They just need the people in their life that they are carrying those hardships for, their loved ones, to recognize and appreciate the fact that they're doing it for them.
Mm.
And I thought that was an interesting take on it, because it's not really discussed much. The sort of the nuances, the differences between men and women, and how, generally speaking, men I think do find it more difficult to talk about their feelings, and not necessarily what they've been through. I think it's quite easy for men to talk about what they've been through, but less so the impact that had on them emotionally.
Yeah.
Um,
I think the setting as well. Like I've spoken to a lot of people about this. Obviously I had Georgia on episode 13 as well. And we were speaking about this and like the setting. So like as we're sat now, we're quite front on. So if I suddenly asked you, how are you feeling? Like tell me your deepest, darkest like fears at the moment, you might find it very hard to speak about that. And some men might not. So there's the nuance that every man is different and some will be okay to talk in that way. But if you were generalizing them, men tend to be more shoulder to shoulder talkers. So this is why stuff like walking and talking works. When we go out on runs in a group of a few of us and we're like chatting side by side, men can feel more comfortable talking that way as well. And the other aspect, yeah, is like obviously women and men are very different. Currently, therapy is a sort of heavily dominated by females in terms of the people who work in the industry. And some men might just not feel comfortable speaking to a woman about certain things, especially if it's quite an embarrassing thing or society might not sort of welcome men talking about that thing as well. So speaking to another man about it who would sort of understand the specifics, and likewise women would prefer to speak to another woman about certain things that only affects women. So yeah, but I think at the minute there's a lot around how the therapeutic space looks and works and how it can be what's the word? Adjusted slightly, I suppose, um, to help men speak more, because we hear men should talk more, men should talk more, but we don't really understand that some men don't feel comfortable just talking face to face in a therapy setting.
Yeah, for sure. I also think generations differ. And I think the younger generations today, a lot of issues that men are facing tend to be due to um, them not knowing their role or status or sort of position in society. Uh, there was a quote I heard once that I resonate with. I think I believe it to be hold quite a lot of meaning, which is if you give a man a purpose and the means of achieving it, they'll crawl over broken glass with a smile on their face to get there.
Mm,
Um, and I genuinely believe that. I think a lot of sort of men's mental health is because they feel like they don't know what their responsibilities are, or they don't have a goal to achieve, or they have an aspiration but don't have the means of achieving it, or perceive they don't have the means of achieving it. Um, and I think that's where potentially school or the education system could have a massive impact on um, mental health in general, but
mm,
specifically young boys and men's mental health. Is I think it could do a better job of helping children realize their passions, um, and encouraging them to pursue those passions, in the sense that you're forced to do all of these different subjects. Um, and I agree that the fundamentals of math, science, and English are incredibly important, and you should be taught those. But really, school should be an opportunity to introduce children to as many different topics, as many different avenues as possible, so they can find their passion.
mm.
Because I believe that no one in the world has ever sucked at what they love to do. Um,
Or if they have, they've got better over
yeah,
time naturally because of how much they love doing it.
exactly that. And it's that saying, if you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life thinking it's a failure. But if you judge it on its ability to swim, then it's probably going to be, its self-esteem is probably going to be quite high.
Yeah.
um, and this desire for society to create all of these all-rounders, rather than, you know, people to, um, focus on one thing or a couple things and really dedicate themselves to that practice and specialize in it. I think there's more scope and more room for that to be encouraged, and I think
Mm,
that would do particularly men's mental health a good service, I think.
mm. Yeah, I suppose you need more funding and stuff in schools in order to like have enough teachers to sort of do enough classes that give those opportunities, I suppose, to sort of try things. But yeah, I totally agree. I think a lot of people get forced to do stuff they don't really want to do in school, just to fit whatever the school needs to look good. Like whatever percentage of our students got between A's, stars, and C's in maths and English and
Mm.
sciences, it's like, okay, but what if they're like creatively minded and they would rather be drawing, painting, sculpting, or like video editing or coding, stuff like that? Like, yeah, like you said, they are important, but everyone's different. So getting a base understanding, but also be able to like start learning that other stuff from that young age as well. Um,
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, schools would be better off, in my opinion, judging their success off of some sort of collection of data of people 10, 15 years post graduating school, and seeing where they're at in their lives.
mm,
How successful are they? And I don't necessarily mean successful in the sense of just financially. That's not what I believe success is. Like, instead of saying, Elon Musk is successful, I would say that the aeronautical engineer that works at SpaceX, that's turned their passion into a way of funding a lot, their life and looking after their loved ones, and
mm,
occasionally treating themselves to whatever they want to do in life. That's what success is to me. They've found what they get enjoyment out of in life and made a career and a living out of it. Um, and in the same way are contributing to the human species progressing and taking care of the people that they love in their life. And I don't think there's a more complete sort of definition of what success looks
Mm.
like than that, really.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will look at success and think success is money. And like you say, like Musk is like the richest man or whatever he is, but that's necessarily not necessarily success. Like you say, success can be whatever it is to certain people, and some people that might be money, but they always trade something off to get that and to get where they are. Like with Elon Musk, sticking on him, he did an interview with Lex Friedman on his podcast, and in that he said, "People think they want to be me, but they don't. My mind is a storm." And
Mm.
it's like, okay, yeah, like the amount of stuff going on in his head is crazy.
Yeah.
And he puts it all on X by all accounts.
Yeah. Well, there's
But
definitely truth in that. There's definitely the people want the lifestyle and the end goal, but they don't want the work that it took to get there or the sacrifices that it took
yeah,
to get there. I think that's the same to be said for anyone who is elite in their field. Whether you look at Olympic athletes or you look at business people in business, CEOs, etc., entrepreneurs, politicians, world leaders. I think that's a commonality they all share is people aspire to be them, but don't aspire to do what it takes
they
necessarily to
don't see
get
the
into those
trade-offs.
positions. Yeah.
So you sort of mentioned about in that segment about schools and like offerings in schools. So I'm going to sort of try and blend this in with the next point that I had to bring up. So I saw a study the other day which said that today's youth, so today's like children and adolescents, are the weakest they've ever been. So like physical weakness. So um, they've got declining cardiorespiratory fitness. They got a steady decline in muscular fitness as well, and that's globally. Um, Sport participation is down and screen time is up. That's one of the reasons for it. And the bit that really like blew my mind, and still does, is that only 1 in 5 adolescents currently meet the international physical activity guidelines. Like the guidelines for physical activity internationally, which I would guess would be pretty easy to achieve, going on my experience of sort of industry standards. But yeah, 1 in 5 adolescents are at that level.
Mm. It's fascinating, really, isn't it? When you think about this whole massive drive in today's society of inclusion, um, you'd think more people would be participating in physical activity and sport, considering all of these uh, sort of, I don't know what the term would be, but drives, I guess, to get more people,
Mm. Like the initiatives.
yeah, like women only gym sessions or women only gyms, you know, all of these different sort of strategies to try and get kids more. You've got levels of PE now in school as well, haven't you? Where they try and group people with a similar standard, so people
I
that
didn't know
aren't,
that.
yeah, so they're not put off. So you've got the more sort of naturally gifted or athletically developed kids tend to all sort of compete together,
Yeah.
and then the people maybe who are less interested in it or demonstrate a lower level of ability potentially are they're sort of graded,
Mm.
and that way to me it would seem that it serves to try not to embarrass, or if you're performing with people of a similar standard to you, you're more likely to engage in it
Mm.
and not feel sort of, oh, well, I shouldn't be here because I'm clearly not up to standard or anything like that. The whole idea is that sport is for everyone, and physical activity should be for everyone, not just for those that are more naturally gifted. Um, so, considering all those factors, it is surprising that obviously the data is demonstrating that it's actually having the opposite effects for some
Mm.
reason.
I would guess that like being in a different class, being in different groups like that would just mean that the most athletically gifted ones are around people of the same caliber get pushed further, and the ones who aren't are just content where they are and don't really get pushed to the same level.
Quite possibly,
I'd be
yeah.
interested to see like how that's playing out, but yeah, in terms of obviously physical activity, it's massive both for physical health, mental health as well. So like we've got this push towards mental health. Obviously we just spoke about men and boys' mental health and women's mental health. But we've got this drive towards mental health, but we're not thinking about physical health as well. And you can look after your mental health with all of the things. You can meditate and you can be mindful and you can do whatever it is, go to therapy. But actually looking after your body as well has a massive effect. Like
Yeah,
I don't have a
100%.
clue for like how most of the body works, like, and I'm sure most people don't, in terms of that sort of thing. But even just when I was speaking to Lauren Callahan in one of the episodes earlier this year, she was talking about how most of our serotonin, 90% I think it is, actually comes from your gut. So we think of serotonin as something that comes from up here in our brain, but most of it comes from the gut. So if you're feeding yourself poorly and you're not looking after your gut microbiome, then serotonin can be down or up or whatever and really affect you mentally. So yeah, I think that's a massive thing that people aren't really talking about as well, is the link between the two.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you put diesel in a Ferrari, it's not going to be very happy with you, is it? And I think it's the same process of the human body. If you feed food is our fuel, and if you feed your body rubbish fuel, your performance is going to show that. And whether that performance is physical performance or mental performance, I believe they're both linked. There's also, a line that you sort of went down, which was people don't understand the importance of physical health in relation to mental health. And I think there is an idea that if all you do is constantly think about the bad things going on in your head, that's all you put attention on. It's all you're gonna feel and all you're gonna think about. And there's something to be said for just not constantly thinking about what's going on in your head and just losing yourself in something physical.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name. I think it's Kipchoge, the marathon runner. Yeah, who's got the world record for the marathon. He said that, the only people that are truly free in life are those who are disciplined. Because he said, without discipline, you are simply a slave to your emotions and your mood. Because you say you're going to go for a run, but then you don't feel like it, so you don't. So you think you have free will, but actually all you are is just a slave to how you feel in the moment.
Yeah.
And I thought that's quite an interesting viewpoint.
Yeah, I like that. I think when you don't feel like something, but you still do it, when you know that thing's going to be beneficial to you,
yeah,
that's the one that matters most.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to go to the gym 5 days a week because you're buzzing all week and you're feeling great. But when Monday rolls around the next week and you're feeling really down, you maybe had a bad weekend, you're telling yourself, don't go to the gym, just have a day off.
Yeah.
Well, no, we're back on the like grind, if you like. So I am going to go, however good or bad I feel. And just by doing that, when you don't feel like it, that's the one that makes a difference.
Yeah, 100%. And, I think it's David Goggins that basically said,
who's going to carry the bolts?
Yeah. Yeah, he does shout that a lot, doesn't he? He's the one that sort of says you don't gain confidence by shouting positive affirmations at yourself in the mirror, but by building an undeniable stack of evidence that you are who you say you are and you do what you say you will do. And
I love that.
That's powerful. Like, that is, have you ever sort of sit there and gone, God, yeah, last time you were on the treadmill, you said you were going to do 5K and it gets to 3.5 or whatever. And you just think, calf's cramping up a little bit. Not really feeling it. I've done 3.5K. That's good enough. Stop there. I should have made those numbers a bit higher to make myself sound a bit more impressive.
Yeah,
when you're running like an ultra marathon
really
and you get like a marathon in and you're just like, oh yeah, nah. and and every time you do that, it hurts yourself, I think.
Mm.
Um,
And then you go next time you're trying to go for that 5K. Well, you're on there and you get to like 3.5K. Well, you get
yeah,
to 4K, and then you start hurting. It's like, well, I've done a little bit longer than last time, so
yeah,
really it's a win. But
yeah,
actually, both times you're aiming for 5, you're now 2.5K below like what you should have had in total. So,
yeah. And it bleeds into, it's not just physical activity. Next time you go, say you're going to do something at work, in the back of your head, you're going to have your inner voice saying to you, "Well, you didn't do it. You didn't do it last time.
mm,
What makes this different?" Um, so that's a big factor. I also There is a caveat to it where I also believe that you're the only person in the world that you can lie to and immediately just believe it and never have to justify it.
mm,
So if you get nervous before, let's say you're playing a sport, you get nervous before starting the game. Why not tell yourself you're the best player in the world? You don't have to. You don't have to put it out there.
trick your
You don't
mind.
have to tell anyone else. Do you know what I mean? You don't have to sort of be the big I am and have a bunch of people say, "No, you're not, mate." But why not tell yourself that you're the best player on that pitch, and believe it?
Mm,
And sort of picture yourself performing the sort of things that you would want, that you would idolize someone else doing or something like that, and that kind of mental rehearsal and that. Why not fake it? You know what I mean?
mm,
So there's two elements. I think there's stuff that you can do in the moment, such as sort of telling yourself stuff that I maybe in reality is false or whatever. But consistently, what's going to benefit you is actually doing what you say you're going to do.
yeah, I like that. And I've spoken to quite a few people about um, that building the evidence thing. So, like, it's all good, like, standing in the mirror, like you say, like, shouting affirmations, telling yourself, yeah, you are strong, you are like dedicated to this. But if it comes to it and you're not, that's that's going to pay way more. So if you can start doing things, they build up that evidence stack, and then when you have those negative thoughts, you look back on that evidence stack and you can flick through and go, yeah, yeah, that happened, that happened, that happened, and I still did it all.
Yeah,
It's just
absolutely.
that reminder, isn't it? Something else that I've been thinking about, but it's not necessarily something I've learned since we last spoke, but in terms of just something that I was thinking about a few days ago, is BMI,
Mm,
and how that still gets heavily used as a major metric in uh, health and fitness. Like, most people who are training are very like concerned about their weight and their BMI, um, but they don't really understand what that is and where it can go wrong. So obviously, for anyone who doesn't know, the BMI is body mass index, and it's essentially it's your height versus your weight. Um, so it compares the two, and you just get put on a chart how heavy you are compared to people your height, essentially. Um, but obviously, if you're a bodybuilder and you've got loads of lean muscle mass and barely any body fat, you can still have the same BMI as someone who's morbidly obese. So you get this massive disparity. And anyway, that's my thoughts. Is that using that solely as something, people say, "Oh, I've got to get my BMI under 25." It's like, what about getting your body fat down instead? Do you know your body fat?
mm.
No. Well, maybe try and find out your body fat, or your hip to weight ratio is another thing.
So this is actually a really interesting topic. So as you stated, there are obvious flaws with using BMI. Generally speaking, believe it's used because it's very easy to obtain, very cheap to obtain, and gives the general public a marker to work towards that doesn't require a high level of intellect or education to understand,
Mm.
which is probably why it's pushed by the NHS. Um, the statement you made is correct. A bodybuilder would come up as probably more morbidly obese. Um, the idea being that the high BMI alerts that individual to potential health risks associated with it. Now, in the case of a bodybuilder, I'd say it's probably still valid and relevant
Yeah,
because
to be fair.
although their BMI is not so high because of the fat that they are carrying, their cardiovascular system will still be under a lot of strain if they're carrying a significant amount of muscle,
And their joints and everything like
and their
that, I
joints.
suppose.
So in terms of the extreme of a bodybuilder, I would say is somewhat still relevant, but it's the sort of population where they are active and athletic, maybe go to the gym, or maybe even sort of semi-professional athletes or professional athletes, where they will score highly on that scale, and it will be a uh, inaccurate reflection of their health, because their lean body mass will. So muscle is more. It doesn't weigh more than fat. It's more dense than fat, and so if you get the same mass, you can have more muscle will weigh more than the same amount of fat, essentially.
Yeah, the same volume.
The same volume. That's
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I
So
was, I always find that funny when people say like, "Yeah, muscle weighs more than fat." It's like, well, no, that doesn't
yeah,
make sense because if you have a kilo of muscle and a kilo of fat, they
it
both weigh a
weighs a kilo.
kilo.
Yeah, it's like that old like, would you
Yeah,
rather a ton of feathers fall on you or a ton of bricks?
yeah,
So well, but they're both a ton. So
yeah. So yeah, it's just that rewording of it, I
yeah, it's
suppose.
just the rewording of it. So yeah, it's a poor reflection of overall health. But like I said, the reason why it's used is because it requires no equipment essentially
Mm,
other than a scale and a tape measure. And it's cheap to administer. The issue with body fat or using that as a means of measuring health is the accuracy of the measurement. So there are a few different ways you can obtain your body fat. Um, the only real accurate way of doing it would be to put you in a tub of acid, dissolve everything there is about you, and then measure how much fat's left over.
mm.
Obviously, ethnically, that isn't possible.
Ethically, logistically,
So,
morally, yeah.
so as a result of that, we have to use sort of slightly less accurate methods, such as DEXA scans, or there's a thing called a bod pod where it measures the displacement of the air inside the pod. Or you can use skin fold calipers, or the bioelectrical impedance machines, which are the ones you tend to see in gyms where you stand on a scale and then put your hands onto metal receptors, and it basically sends a current through your body, and it measures the time it takes for that signal to get from one receptor to the other. Um, issue with those are, one, their calibration, two, how well they serviced or how often are they serviced, three, your level of hydration on that day can change your score.
Time of day.
How many points of contact you've got can change your score. Where you hold the device can change your score. All of these sort of things. So, and then the skin fold calipers actually takes quite a lot of skill to administer accurately. And if you're not well trained in that discipline, you're likely to get a very different score. The margin for error is higher. And also doing it on yourself is quite hard because you have to find the correct skin fold locations on your body, and anatomically that's quite hard to do on yourself and get the right amount when you pinch it and hold it. It's all quite difficult. And then the other two methods are quite invasive and quite expensive. So those are the implications of using body fat. The one that would probably be the easiest to do, to teach yourself and to do, would be the skin folds.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't, when you're tracking just generic health, it doesn't really matter how accurate it is. What matters is how reliable are your measurements. So you can track your either progress or not progress, essentially. So if you're wrong by 2% body fat, as long as you're wrong by 2% body fat every time you do it, you can still track your progress.
Yeah. The other one as well that is quite useful and quite a good, again, it's a bit like the BMI, it's just a sign that you might need to look at stuff, is the hips to weight ratio. So your circumference of your hips divided by your circumference of your waist then gives you a number. And if it's over a certain amount, I want to say it's like 0.9, 0.9 maybe. It might vary slightly for men and women. But yeah, that's a good one as well, because obviously if your waist is much larger than it should be, then that's going to potentially, I would say that obese people have a much bigger waist than a bodybuilder potentially.
Yeah. And there's also a difference between subcutaneous fat and visceral fat, and the health implications of the two.
Just explain those for us.
Yep. So subcutaneous fat is the fat that you generally carry on your skeletal system. So it, it's more obvious to the human eye that excess fat is being carried versus
Mm.
visceral fat, which is like the fat that is carried on your organs internally. Generally speaking, health implications are more correlated with the fat that is surrounding your organs internally than it is the fat that you're stored, due to the fact that the fat that is more readily stored is easier to break down and use as energy,
Mm.
um, and puts less pressure on the vital organs
Mm.
and limits their.
Yeah, that's the one I always used to tell myself. Like, there was people who ate like awful diets who you know in life, and I'm sure everyone will sort of know someone out there who just eats awfully but doesn't really put any weight on.
Mm,
But what you don't see is what's going on inside and around the organs. Like, that could really be damaging that, and adding the fat to the organs, as you say there. Um, but yeah, that's an interesting thought. Anyway, that's something I was thinking about, and yeah. So we're going to go on to a sort of mindset thing. Okay, so I'm
mindset.
going to read this one out to you because it was a sort of little excerpt from a book I was reading, which was The 0.1% Academy, which is by Gareth Timmins, an ex-Royal Marine commando. So the book's all about mindsets and how he perceived himself being in the Marines versus when he actually came out, and how he sort of clung to that identity and then overcoming that sort of thing. Really interesting book, really good book to read if you haven't already. But yeah, this little excerpt was quite interesting, I thought. So it's based on the mindsets of successful Marine commandos. So, according to Alexei Janssen, a top learning and performance coach who spent 17 years coaching Royal Marines and Special Forces operators, all elite performers hold two conflicting beliefs at once, which makes them surprisingly irrational. So, the first belief is they have total belief in the self. So, I will pass and get to the end of training. The likelihood is 100%. The second belief they have is acknowledgement that failure is a likely outcome. So, I might not pass. The likelihood seems more like 50-50. So, how that might sort of perceive themselves like in one flowing thought pattern might be, I'm 100% sure I'm going to pass and get to the end of this course. I just know it. There's absolutely no way I'm going to leave here without a green beret. But I might not. It's hard. If I don't pass, then so be it. I'll go and do something else. But that's not going to happen because I already know it's in the bag. I can do this. So
Mm,
I found that really interesting because if you take those two different mindsets, they don't make sense to go together. But the way it was then explained, following that little excerpt, was people that only had one or the other didn't succeed because someone who thought, I've got this 100%, it's in the bag, as soon as something went wrong, it just shot them to pieces and they just couldn't get over that. And if someone was on the other side and thought, oh, it's 50-50, they just didn't have the drive or the determination to get over those really hard days. And for anyone who knows anything about commando training, there's a lot of hard days.
mm.
But I just found it interesting, the two sort of mindsets working together and how you need both of them, even though they don't make sense going together to pass.
Do you think that in some way could be linked to what we were speaking earlier with positive affirmations versus lying to yourself? How they counter each other, but at the same time could be used in conjunction to
Yes.
be successful.
Yes, I didn't think about that, but absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And do you think potentially a more accurate reflection might not be, I'm certain I'm going to get through this, but if I don't, I'll do something else. It's, I'm certain I'm going to get through this, and I'm certain that if I fail along the way, I'll just get up and keep going until I succeed. Or is it more the complete utter opposite of, it's okay if I don't make it?
I think it's both together. I think they definitely would think that, like, if I don't get it, then I will just keep going until I succeed. But obviously you can't with that sort of thing. Like, if you fail, you fail, you're out.
Mm.
So I suppose it's more relevant to commando training, say, or some form of training where you can't really get second chances, or that aspect. But yeah, I think having that, even by them thinking, if I fail, then I'll keep going until I succeed, is them acknowledging that failure is a possibility.
Mm.
So, like, if it's 100% no, I'm going to pass, that's never even entered my mind, then they're only thinking of the first point. Whereas by saying what you said, it is including that second point, just in a different wording, I suppose. But yeah, I found it really interesting. I think it's a testament to all of the people, and I think it's a mindset that you can take into everything else. Like, with a podcast, for example, it's like, yeah, I believe in myself, and other people believe in me, and that's cool. Like, I'm driven to do this, and I'm really
Mm.
enjoying it, and I want to do this and just see where it goes. But life happens. I've also got to accept that, and you just
Yeah.
never know what's around the corner.
It's a really,
So,
really interesting concept, and I do believe that that is one thing that is constantly, obviously demonstrated in a profession like that, that can be sort of, it still applies to everyone in life, no matter your age,
mm,
gender, you know, religious background, whether you have one or not. It can be applied in every way, that life is not fair, and you will fail and likely fail often, but that's okay. I think people internalize a lot of things in life, and they take things personally when they don't need to, in the sense that if we were to have a boxing match right now, me and you were to hit me in the face,
mm,
I would accept that as part of what I'd agreed to do. I wouldn't take that personally. I wouldn't think that you were attacking me personally. You're
mm,
doing your job, which is to, in the agreement that we have, you're doing your part, and I've just accepted it. Whereas in life, someone might do something that insults you or upsets you or whatever, and then you immediately take that personally.
mm.
Um, whereas I think Rowan Atkinson actually said something really powerful, which is life in close up is a tragedy, but in sort of, if you zoom out, it's a comedy. And I genuinely think that's so true. Like, if you watch all of these sort of funny programs on TV, even like something like as well known as Friends, and you watch what some of those characters go through, and we find it hilarious.
Mm.
But if you actually put yourself in that character's shoes, and you thought, God, if that was my life, God, it'd be awful. Do
Yeah.
you know what I mean? But we find it hilarious because we're zoomed out, because it's not us, and because it's not real.
Mm.
We find it hilarious. But if you took some of those scenarios, like, you know, Ross,
Traumatic.
it's like Ross, for example, saying the wrong name at the altar of a wedding, and then getting divorced for like the third time before he's 30 years old. like,
Yeah,
like
you're right.
you'd be like, oh my God, what am I doing? Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Or like getting suspended from work because you had an anger management issue over a sandwich. Do you know? Like, those are like things that if that happened to you in real life, you'd be thinking, what is going on?
Yeah.
But when you zoom out of it and you don't internalize it as personal, it's hilarious.
Mm. It's how we perceive things that happen to us, isn't it?
Perception is almost everything to do with. So I think there's a big to circle back to what you were kind of saying, of that mindset, that of no matter what, it will be okay. And if you just try and sort of zoom out of your own situation, and try and internalize things less, you might find that sometimes things aren't as bad as you first thought.
Mm.
That I watched a podcast on leadership,
Okay.
and because we're on the topic of Royal Marines and Special Forces, it's just triggered my memory of it. And it was how they went to, I think it was SEAL Team 6, and they asked them, who do you look for? And for those who don't know, SEAL Team 6 is a specialist unit within the SEAL teams, which in itself is a Special Forces unit. So they're basically picking the best of the best to go to this team, one of the highest performing organizations in their field. And they drew a graph with the bottom line trust and the top line performance. And they said, right, obviously everyone wants this person of high performance, high trust, but they would rather take someone of high trust and low performance. Obviously, performance being relative, they're still going to be very good at what they do, but in the scale of their colleagues, they'd be lower than they would someone of incredibly high performance and low trust. And what was interesting about it is in business and in lots of professions, we have a million ways of measuring performance, but almost no way of measuring trust.
Mm.
And then that just got me thinking of how would you measure, or how do you foster and create trust, and then how could you measure it?
Yeah.
And what I think they do in special forces is they strip you back to who you are as a person. They find out exactly who you are. They take away all the things that would allow you to mask who you are deep down in your core. As in that they make you cold, they make you miserable, they make you tired, and they make you hungry, and they take all the nice things away from you, and they see then how you react to pressure, sort of trauma, and all these things. And if you demonstrate the right sort of personality, I suppose, or the right character traits, and you persevere and you get through that training without ever having met anyone else in your team, they already know that they can rely on you for these basic things.
You've all met that bar.
You've met that standard. And then the other way of doing it is shared suffering and shared experiences foster trust. And I think that's where potentially a lot of professions maybe could learn from it, where they, prior to getting into a certain job or anything, if you test people, or you give people an identity by making them all go through the same process, then straight away off the production line, as soon as they get into that team, they know that, or at least at this level, they can trust them. And essentially, in every job, everything relies on trust.
Yeah, I think trust. You got to trust who you work with. Trust who, if you're in a management position, trust the people above you to make the right decisions, and trust the people below you. Not that anyone's above or below, but if you look at a manager hierarchy, that those people who you're managing can make the right decisions as well. You hear a lot about like micromanaging and like in offices and stuff like that, and people are overbearing, like looking at the performance, like you say, speaking about that sort of stuff. Also, people are snaky, so like if they're out for themselves, they're out for themselves.
Yeah.
Which can sometimes be difficult to work out, and sometimes you only find out once they've stabbed you in the back. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's yeah, how to build trust. I think is just by, like you say, like going through things together. That's almost like that evidence-based thing we were talking about before, is like you're building evidence that you can do the thing together and that you can rely on each other to do the thing. But without getting that chance to do that as well, just trusting that they can make the right decisions, asking them if, like, sort of delegating things to people and saying, can you do this for me? They'll think, wow, they trust me to do this. Absolutely. And then they put their effort in. I think if you don't do that, then you build that sort of lack of trust, I suppose.
Yeah. Almost like empowerment.
Yeah. Yeah. Empowering people. Absolutely. Big word, big buzzword, empowerment. What does it mean? So I think we're coming to the end. So I'm going to leave everyone with a little quote that I read recently. And it's about sort of being curious, I suppose. So it comes from Anthony de Mello's book, Awareness, which is all about being aware, waking up. It's a very spiritual book. But the quote goes like this. And so in order to wake up, the one thing you need the most is not energy or strength or youthfulness or even great intelligence. The one thing you need most of all is the readiness to learn something new. So there you go.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna drop the
Drop
mic
the mic.
there and
Yeah.
leave you to go out and learn something new this week. Ask some people some questions. Just follow your curiosity, whatever you're doing. So thank you for coming on, Tom. It's been a bit different, but I've enjoyed it thoroughly.
Thank you.
If you have enjoyed the episode, please do share it with someone who you think might enjoy it. Any of the subjects we've spoken about. If you're interested and you've got an opinion yourself, you can always comment down below. And if you could, follow the show and rate the show, that really helps us reach new people as well. And you can follow us on Instagram at Lonely Chapter Podcast. And lastly from me, thank you for listening.